Bilbo Baggins, I am not trying to help you. I'm trying to rob you. Hey there, kids, and welcome back to the channel. I'm Uncle Frank, and that you are having a great day. And in today's video, we're going to be sitting back, relaxing, and having a wonderful conversation. Following up yesterday's conversation, in my previous video, I talked a bit about not getting caught up in the moment, thinking your decisions out just a bit before you make them, because, hey, there are things you could regret in the future. And in the comment section to that video, one of the users on YouTube, I think his name was Nugget Von Hamburg, which is it's definitely a name, made a comment along the lines of, hey, mind sharing your top 5 regrets or mistakes? And I figured, you know what? Yeah, that's good enough to make video topic. And I pulled out this little notepad, wrote down just the first 5 things that came to mind when it came to some of the past mistakes I made. Now, these aren't in any particular order, it's just what came to mind first. In fact, now that I'm looking at this list, I know for a fact that one of the larger mistakes I definitely made in the past is not on here, but that can be a topic for another video. It's quite an embarrassing one. But it's more of a financial lesson rather than a TCG collector mistake kind of thing. So without any further ado, I hope you guys are ready for story time, because we have 5 mistakes I made, or decisions I made, that I regretted either in the moment or later on down the road. So let's begin with the first one, selling off my Yu-Gi-Oh collection. In case you guys weren't aware, when I was younger, I was absolutely into Yu-Gi-Oh! I had been playing the game since Starter Deck Kaiba and Starter Deck Yugi hit the States. That's right, since the very beginning, I've been buying and playing with Yu-Gi-Oh! Cards, keeping up with the meta, playing in tournaments. It was a lot of fun. My favorite era will and always will be the Edison era, where Lightsworns were a big thing, Lightsworns being my favorite deck. But not too long after the Edison format, 2011-ish, after the Synchro era started and after the XYZ era had come and gone, by that point I really had started to fall out of love with Yu-Gi-Oh! And by the time Pendulums came along, I had decided that the game was no longer what I enjoyed, and I decided to hop ship, so to speak, and that's where I got into Magic the Gathering. Not that long before I decided to really get into Magic. So as part of that decision, I decided, you know what, Yu-Gi-Oh! Is just not fun anymore, I'm going to get out. And I sold my entire Yu-Gi-Oh! collection at the time, which was a lot of cards. And we're talking, like, they weren't all perfect condition. They weren't going to be slabbed by anyone who bought them as a PSA 10 or anything. But I did have some really nice vintage cards, some nice first edition cards. Some things that come to mind is that beautiful Yata-Garasu, some good Six Samurai cards, a lot of really good Lightsworn cards, including, like, Ghost Rare Honest at the time, the Ultimate Rare Judgment Dragon from the tournament packs. I had a lot of really good cards, and I got rid of them thinking that I would never again want to play the game or come back to it. I would never potentially fall back in love with Yu-Gi-Oh! And, you know, not even a few years later, I hadn't even gotten back into Yu-Gi-Oh! When I started feeling a twinge of regret, because, you know, that was still a collection that I had built up over 10 years. And by that point, you know, back then it wasn't really like an insanely valuable collection or anything. Just a handful of pricier cards, but still, it was something that I had put a lot of work into, and after it was gone, I deeply regretted getting rid of it, which is why nowadays, when someone's talking about getting out of a card game, regardless of what the game is, the one thing I always tell them is, hey, look, if you're feeling like you don't love it anymore, just take your collection, put it in a box, put it in your closet, sit on it for a year or two, and see if you still feel that way. And if you do, then you can go ahead and maybe move forward with your decision. But otherwise, I'd say, hey, you might change your mind sooner or later. The second thing I want to talk about is a more recent item, and it's just kind of a regret of mine because it's a good example of me not putting my money where my mouth is in a time when I had the opportunity to do so. And that is not buying more Pokemon Go. And I did buy some Pokemon Go. I have some mini tins and some of those Dragonite Pokeballs over there on the shelf. But I don't have any ETBs sealed. I don't have any of the collection boxes, which I think were Eevee and Mewtwo, I think. There was an Eevee one, I know that, a shiny Eevee box. And I did want them, okay? I have, fun fact, I actually do not play Pokemon Go. I have never played Pokemon Go. I thought the app was silly. But I did greatly enjoy the Pokemon Go set. There was just something about it that I really liked. I especially liked the gimmick of the Ditto cards, the peelable Ditto cards, where it looks like a Bidoof, a Spinarak, and what was the third one? I do not remember now. But I liked that gimmick. There were 3 Pokemon that you could peel away like a little sticker, and it's a Ditto underneath it. That's great. I like that a lot. And even when it was fresh off the presses, I thought Pokemon Go was a banger of a set. And I did buy like ETBs and rip them open and just enjoy the cards, but I didn't get any to keep sealed. And this was at a time where I was telling my friends, like, you know, Pokemon Go, it's not a great set, but it's a nice set. And for one reason or another, you know, every time a decision came where I could purchase Pokemon Go or purchase something else, I usually went with purchasing something else with the mentality of, oh yeah, Pokemon Go, nobody likes that set, it's going to stay super cheap forever. And it didn't. So while I do still want to get some Pokemon Go ETBs for myself at some point in the future, I do deeply regret just not grabbing them when they were as cheap as they were for a while. Thing number 3. Yeah, story time number 3. I very much regret buying Magic the Gathering cases over Pokemon product at the time, at a specific time, at a specific point in time. You see, post 2019, after War of the Spark and Throne of Eldraine had come out, Throne of Eldraine came out with the collector booster boxes, okay? That was a massive red flag to me in the moment. And that was the point where I started really being critical of Magic the Gathering, not just in terms of story over on the Lore Seeker channel, but in terms of the direction I thought the game itself was going, since I looked at collector booster boxes and realized then and there that was going to have long-term damage to the game that I personally believed it would inflict. Whether or not collector boosters are a net positive or a net negative are up to you to decide. But fast forward a few months, and even though I was hypercritical of Magic, and I was getting into Pokemon more and more, but just collecting random cards and toying around with buying and selling it again, I wasn't really buying any sealed Pokemon product. In fact, I was buying no sealed Pokemon product at the time. And the reason I regret this so much is because at the time, especially around the release of Streets of New Capenna, okay, which is a wonderful, interesting set that I'm sure everybody has nothing but nice things to say about, especially around the time of Streets of New Capenna, I had grown to loathe holding on to Magic sealed product. In fact, the Streets of New Capenna was when I told myself, like, I gotta stop this, but I kept going at a time when I could have been buying anything else. And one of the things that I could have bought that was on my radar at the time were Pokemon boxes, especially some of the Pokemon sets that weren't appreciating that well. I still looked at those and went, you know what? I mean, I do like Pokemon. I do play the games from time to time. I'm not a huge fan, but it can't be as bad as Streets of New Capenna. And even then, I didn't get into buying sealed product until the end of Sword and Shield and the start of Scarlet and Violet. And that's just something hindsight's 2020. Obviously, the Pokemon stuff from that era has appreciated way better than the Magic stuff from that era. But still, even back then, I was like, why am I buying Magic? I should buy something else, and then I just didn't. Because, you know, I'm a genius. Story time number 4. I did not get into Flesh and Blood because of Transformers. Let me explain. The Transformers TCG came and went in basically no time at all. Wizards of the Coast put it out, and I did play it for a bit. It had a Grimlock card, and Grimlock's my favorite, so obviously I played the Transformers TCG. I was never good at it. There's a guy I know who was like really good at it. He went to like the bigger tournaments. He won a big old blue box from one of the tournaments, and I was like, "Is that the trophy?" And he's like, "No, then this is a product." That's a different story. But by the time Flesh and Blood had really come out, and like I was really aware of it, the Transformers game is gone. And my mentality at the time was, I'm just not going to get into any newer TCGs until they've proven themselves to get over the 2-year gap. Because while I did enjoy Transformers, I was kind of bummed out that 2 years came and went, and then it was gone. So I looked at Flesh and Blood with that frame of reference and told myself, in 2 years, this isn't even going to be a game likely. And so much of the discourse at the time was how it's just only appeals to anti-Magic fans, because that was a huge thing that people were talking about back in the day. Like, oh, you don't like Magic the Gathering? Well, play Flesh and Blood. And while I did buy and sell Flesh and Blood cards and product, because people were selling collections, they were selling bulk. A friend of mine, I guess, bought a box and then it tanked, so he sold it to me and I just ripped it open to sell the singles. I did not actually get into Flesh and Blood until the Uprising set, which was quite a bit later. Now, for those of you who don't know, the first few sets of Flesh and Blood, they're pretty pricey. Welcome to Wrath, or Wraith, however you want to pronounce it, Crucible of War, Arcane Rising, all of those sealed products, especially the first edition products, which were on the market at the time, they appreciated it very well, and I just didn't even think about buying them. And I could have done that. Now, the final story I want to talk about tonight is something that I deeply regretted in the moment, but in hindsight, I've realized that it's just a facet of life, okay? It's a specific card that I sold back when I had my first store way back in the day. It was Moat. I had bought 2 copies of Moat from Legends off of a gentleman for a decent price. I had bought them as part of a very small collection he had brought in, and those were the only 2 cards that were really worth noticing. He did have a lot of like Fallen Empires, Ice Age, Homeland stuff too, and that was nice to have, but 2 Moats. Anyway, after I bought them, I was like, what, I got 2 Moats, I'm going to sell one now for full market, and then just hold on to the other one, because, at the time I was thinking, like, how many Legends cards are going to come my way, right? Well, a few months pass, and, I'm like, okay, I need some cash to pick up the next set. This was 2016, so Eldritch Moon, I think, was the set that I was getting ready to order, and I wanted just a few $100 extra to get a few more boxes in. And at the time, Moats were like $300, around $300 to $400. And so one day I, took it, put it up for sale, and it sold pretty, like, right away. Here's where the regret comes in. A few weeks later, like 2 weeks after I sold it, for whatever reason, the price of Moat over doubled. It went from like a $300 card to a $700 card. And let me tell you, at the time, I was livid. I had thought that I just made the biggest mistake of my life. It was just a single card sale, but I thought that was the dumbest decision I could have made. I didn't want to sell the card. I just wanted the money. Why did I sell it? Oh, that was so stupid of me. I'm never going to get one again. Eldritch Moon isn't even that good of a set. Why did I sell this for some Eldritch Moon stuff? But, not even 2 weeks later, I had some serious seller's remorse, and I was like, oh, I'm beating myself up over this Moat. And I told everyone who knew me at the time knew that I had sold a Moat right before it jumped up in price. A fun story. But now, looking back at it, that's just a fact of life. You can never predict where the market's going to go for any item, any TCG. And I've had this happen several times where I've held on to items as a direct result of this Moat sale. I've held on to cards that I probably shouldn't have, telling myself, this could double up in price any time. And I could have just sold them to get the money then when I needed it, instead of, making things harder for myself, holding on to items that might never appreciate. Because that's the thing. Yeah, sure, that Moat did go up in price exponentially. But it also could have just not. Had I held on to it, like, what were the odds of it going up right after I sold it? It could have never gone up. Or in some parallel universe, it goes down. You can't predict the future. You can never predict where the price of an item goes. So in hindsight, I got upset over nothing. I beat myself up over nothing. But at the time, I deeply regretted, and I was even frustrated with myself over that. Like, why would you sell something that old and that rare? You should have just held on to it. I wasn't thinking, about finance or anything like that. But yeah, that's really it. Those are 5 stories of mistakes that I made that I either regretted right away or came to regret later, or regretted heavily in the moment and just came around to going, you know what, it's not that big of a deal. Because in the end, that Moat sale was not that big of a deal. Just a fun little story, though, because it did go up like right after I sold it. Crazy stuff. Hope you enjoyed. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. Leave a comment down below. Were there any crazy decisions you've made that you regretted in the past? If so, I would love to know. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.